Hello everybody and welcome. So this is part 5 of 32 of my NFL rankings, and for this one we got the Chicago Bears. Now the Chicago Bears finished last year at 6-11, and honestly I was pretty surprised with how they played. I mean, they obviously for a rookie quarterback they played pretty well, but I mean there were still times where the offense was pretty shaky last year, and yeah, basically coming into this year I think they're going to do very similar to like what they did last year. They did end up losing some big names like Akeem Hicks and Khalil Mack, but I mean, based off where this new front office is going, since they have a new GM and a new coach and some other new positions, I think they're basically, it's not a full rebuild, but they're basically just trying to see what they got with this year and what they can do going on in the next year. So when it came to the play from last year, like I said, they did have some pretty impressive like games here and there, but overall, they still aren't the best of teams just yet. Their win week 2 against the Bengals was really, really impressive after you saw what that Bengals team turned into. And then them beating the Raiders was also a very impressive win. Other than that, when you see the rest of the schedule, they had a lot of shaky play. I mean, they showed some promise, like I said, with Fields in the offense and like how good they could be, but when it came to like when they obviously like when they needed it, they just could never get it done. But they showed flashes here and there of they have the potential to be a they have the potential to be a good team, I would say, but like you see with their play from last year, I mean, there were some games where they ended up scoring, and if you look at the yards, they were all right. They just somehow couldn't get the win. But then there were some other games where Justin Fields seemed to look like a real rookie, and they just like struggled to get anything off the ground. If you see by some of their stats, basically, like for example, their points per game, yards to play, third down conversion, fourth down conversion, red zone scoring, and touchdowns a game are all either 27th or lower. And I mean, and those are some of the big, obviously they're just numbers at the end of the day, but I would say most importantly the touchdown, only averaging like just barely 2 touchdowns a game, like just under a 1.9 and only scoring 18 points. I mean, it's going to be hard to win some games nowadays unless your defense is doing a really, really good job on the back end. But if you could see, their defense was, although it was alright, they led up about 23 games. So basically, by looking at it, the Bears were losing by almost a touchdown every single game. But if you look at some of their rushing stats weren't terrible. They averaged a lot of rushing plays, and then if you look, most of their offense ranked in the top half of the NFL, other than the rush yards per play and rushing touchdowns when it came to rushing. But so yeah, basically when it comes to their rushing game, looks like it could be potentially really good next year, especially with a very mobile quarterback. But where they're going to need to get help is from like the passing play, because if you look, they're basically their best rankings 23rd with passes a game, but so they finished 23rd and 24th with pass play percentage and passes a game, but they all finished basically 30th or below in every stat when it came to passing. So when it comes into next year, basically it's just, I'm not going to fault Justin Fields too much. He is a rookie and he needs to learn, obviously, so he had to get 1 year under his belt. Basically, if they improve all these numbers, then I think obviously they'll be okay. But if Justin Fields can make that jump next year and boost some of these numbers, then I think the Bears have potential to be a pretty good team. But like I said, I don't think they're going to do too well next year. I think, you know what? Let's look at it. Look at their schedule for next year. Like I could see them maybe splitting with Detroit this year based on what Detroit's doing. I could see them beating Houston. I could see them beating New York, and then maybe the Jets and Atlanta. But past that, I just don't. Maybe they might be able to steal a game later in the year if some people are sitting some people. Say like the Minnesota game, or I don't think they would sit anybody week 16, but say they do in the Buffalo game, they might be able to like steal a game like that. But for most part, I think it's going to be very similar to last year, where they just basically are trying to just see what Justin Fields can do and see what that offense can do with what they got around it. I think this is basically going to be like a trial year for them, just to see what they got and what they need to upgrade going into the next season, because going into the next season, they have about over $100 million. I think it's like 120 to 130 million that they can spend on free agents and all that. So if Justin Fields can show promise in this upcoming season, then I think the Bears could have potential to make some pretty good upgrades. And when it comes to their offense, I mean, David Montgomery, Khalil Herbert as the running backs, and Darnell Mooney, Byron Pringle, and then Cole Kmet. I mean, they have a decent little wide receiving core. They just, obviously, they could use a big name there for some help, but they got all the pieces for right now to be all right enough. It's just basically going to come down to have Justin Fields can make the plays and basically on what the Bears are going to do next year when it comes to offense. Because with the new system and everything, it's going to be interesting to see if they try to take advantage of some of the stuff that Justin Fields can do. And then when it comes to the defense, they have some people like Eddie Jackson, Roquan Smith, and Jalen Johnson. So, I mean, they got some good names again, but I think this is where they're going to need to spend a little bit more if they want to get some help. Losing Khalil Mack and Akeem Hicks is huge losses, but getting Muhammad is a really helpful piece on the rushing edge. That'll help a little bit with the Khalil Mack hole, but they lost a big. So between Muhammad and Robert Quinn, they should have a decent little pass rush on the edge, but they're losing a huge piece in the middle when they lost Akeem Hicks. But overall, looking at their team, I think the Bears have a lot of, I would say they aren't, out of all the worst teams, they all the lower tier teams, they definitely have the most promise because of all the pieces they have. It's just more of how are they going to fit, what is this new GM going to do, what can the new coach do. It's going to come down to basically what the coaching staff can do and what the next management can do. The Bears ended up taking the Colts DC, Matt Eberflus, and he did a really good job with the defense for the Colts last year. So defensively, I think this team is going to be pretty decent. If he's able to do what he did with the Colts defense, kind of similarly with the Bears defense, I think they're going to be a pretty all right defense. It's just going to be coming down to getting another year under Justin Fields and then trying to see what they can do with some of the other names and see what they need to pick up in the coming years. So when it comes to the Chicago Bears and what they're going to do next season, I think basically just going to be not a rebuild year, but just more of a see what we got year. I mean, they're out of all the bottom tier teams, they're definitely, I think, one of the better ones because of the nucleus they have of young guys. It's just going to be more of, can they see who can go where, what they can do with what they got, and then more of just seeing where they need to fill everything. With the $100 million going in the cap next year, I think they'll be able to get a big splash play. But in order to get the big splash play, I think that in order to get the splash play, I think that they're going to have to kind of prove that they can be all right this year. And between Matt Eberflus, Justin Fields, the new GM, and all the other small pieces I think they can do enough to I would say basically if they can win close to about what I said, if they can win about 5 to 6 games, I think they're going to prove to a lot of people that they can be good. They just need to get a few more pieces, and I think that they are maybe, based on what they have this year, I think that maybe they could be potentially 2-3 years removed from the playoffs and then get enough good pieces.